afternoon and welcome to the UCI Libraries. I'll give these few Millionaire folks a chance to make themselves comfortable. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the UCI Libraries. I'm John Renaud, and it's my privilege to serve as the Associate University Librarian for Research Resources. Thank you for joining us today. It's my pleasure to welcome you back to our in-person First Folio Friday event. We sincerely thank you for your understanding regarding the slight modifications to today's schedule and following UCI's indoor mask policy to keep our community safe. Thank you so much. Thank you. We are here today to celebrate Shakespeare's plays and poems written almost half a millennium ago. They continue to captivate and entertain us with deep insights into human nature. The libraries are delighted once again to co-sponsor the event with the School of Humanities Shakespeare Center and the New Swan Shakespeare Festival. And thank you for being here. Again, a special thank you to Professor Julie Lefton for her continued support of the libraries and sharing her expertise with us every year. Thank you, Julie. After today's lecture by Andrea Mays and a short performance by UCI theater students, you will have the opportunity to view a rare and priceless copy of Shakespeare's First Folio presented by Quezada from Special Collections and Archives. In addition, you will see UCI's Shakespeareana collection, including some rare texts that are thought to have inspired Shakespeare's writings. The First Folio was donated to the UCI Libraries in 1986 by Dr. Patrick Hamruddy, a proud UCI alumnus. We hope you will enjoy the short clip in which Hamruddy himself shares how he acquired the rare book and why he donated it to the UCI Libraries.
Ah, this beautiful thing. Be amazed how the material of this book, how fine it is, how great it is. I mean, this is a book that doesn't stain easily or anything like that. And I was familiar with it when I was very young. I had seen this somewhere, I don't know where. But it wasn't until when I got to the point where I had my own company and I started to make a lot of money. And one day, a gentleman from Boston came in and said, hey, in LA, there's a copy, there is the First Folio is available. I said, I'll buy it. He said, it's going to be expensive. I said, I didn't care, I wanted it, and I did buy it. And over a period of a year, I was going to put it into a safe, and I said, no, I want people to see it. And I put it on a table in my office, but then I started to worry that people are going to pick it up and they're going to get dirty hands and all this kind of thing, and this was too precious. So I tried to figure out, okay, what would I really do with it that I think it's going to be used the way it should be? And then, aha, there's a fellow over there that runs, I guess he runs part of the information stuff here at the school. But anyway, I went over and I said, would you like a copy? Would you like to have my book? He said, yeah. I said, oh, okay, I'll bring it over. And I just put it in a briefcase and walked it over. And he said, oh my God, what are you doing? I said, well, this is it. And he said, yes, it is. And I was really kind of shocked that it was so rare for anyone to have, because I had one. So it can't be really that rare. Well, I finally did a little studying and I found out just how rare this is. And I was so happy because when I came over, I found, when I used to come over quite a bit when I was actually working down 5 miles from here or so. And it was always out on display, in the library. And that's so neat, that people have a chance to see it. And so, that was really, to me, it was a gift to me that I could supply something like this.
And now it is my honor to introduce our speaker, Professor Andrea Mays, author of The Millionaire and the Bard. Professor Mays is a professor of economics at Cal State Long Beach and a renowned First Folio scholar. Andrea, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Where's Cheryl? Okay, I take my mask back? Yeah? Okay, there we go. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here in person. It is so wonderful to be back in the room and not on Zoom. The only person who would disagree with that is my dog, who is very sad that I'm no longer on Zoom 24/7. So thank you to all the people who helped bring me here as well. Patrick Hanratty for making the donation, for having the foresight to want programming built around the copy. Julia Lupton, Eli, Lorelei, who might be here somewhere, and her whole team. Thank you for bringing me here. And my talk today is in part, so first, how many of you are first timers, have not been to First Folio Friday before? Okay, so a fair number of people. All right, so my talk today is inspired in part by a talk that Eli Simon gave, and I happened to see it. And he was talking about the season 4 New Swan Theater. And he mentioned Pericles. And immediately my ears pricked up and I thought, I know something about Pericles that maybe even Eli doesn't know. And that is, it is one of only 2 plays of the Shakespeare canon that is not in the First Folio. Yeah. So when you go into the room and you have a look at either the genuine article, the First Folio, or the facsimile copy that's on display there, look in the catalog, which is basically the list of the plays that appear, and neither of those 2 plays appears in the catalog. There's a third one that doesn't appear in the catalog, and that's Troilus and Cressida, but that play is actually in the First Folio, and that's another tale, another day. Okay. So I also inspired partly by Julia, I brought some visual aids. Pericles and 2 noble kinsmen are the 2 that are not in the First Folio that are part of the canon. And Troilus and Cressida is not in the catalog, but it's in the First Folio. All right, so Julia gave a talk that I saw not that long ago, and I was inspired to bring visual aids because they worked really well. So first thing is, what is a folio? And that refers to the size of the page. So a folio is about this size. You'll see some in the room across the hall in a minute. And I wanted to distinguish that from another format that you're going to be hearing about today, which is a quarto. So this is approximately twice the size of a folio, and I've sort of cut it a little bit so that it looks imperfect, which a handmade sheet of paper would be. You would put a piece of paper this large into the printing press. You would have 2 pages that were set up. You'd print this size of this side of the paper. You'd hang it up on a line in the print shop to dry. When it was all dried, you'd stack those copies and then, of course, flip the page over and print on the other side. If you then fold that paper once, that is a folio format. And prior to the Shakespeare First Folio, with one exception, that format had been reserved for really subjects with some gravitas, like politics and religion, heraldry, history, things like that. So one other folio had been printed with plays included in it. The Shakespeare First Folio was the first in this format to be exclusively plays. If you fold this paper one more time, that is a quarto format. If you fold it again, that's an octavo format. And there's even one across the hall that's folded yet another time. All right. So one of the things that you'll see in catalogs for old books is that the copy is uncut. And that usually means that, so if you're reading this paper, reading these pages for the first time and you turn it, they're actually attached at the top. So you have to cut that. So books often came with a bone knife, or people had a bone knife that they would use to cut those pages open so you could see them. Yeah? So you could also tell if you went into somebody's library whether they'd actually read the books, right? All right, so folio, serious stuff. Quarto, more like a paperback, and this is the format that most of the plays had been published in prior to the first folio. And again, octavo, we'll talk about those. So they're my visual aids. All right. So let me talk a little bit about this first folio, or the first folio, and that is, it was a project, publishing this book was a project of the two great unsung heroes of English language literature, John Hemmings and Henry Condell, who were fellow actors with Shakespeare, and also later Shakespeare's partners at the Globe Theatre. They were shareholders at the Globe Theatre, and as such, they had access to the only fair copies of the manuscripts of Shakespeare's plays. And by the time they made the decision, sometime after 1616, to put this volume together, many of those manuscripts had gone up in flames in a fire at the Globe Theatre. So we don't know exactly what sources they had available to them, but they would have had, for example, all of the plays that already had been printed in quarto, plus whatever manuscripts the Globe Theatre still owned that had not gone up in smoke, plus their memories of how the plays had been performed when they were in it, or when they were being even directed by Shakespeare performing the plays. This is a memorial to Hemmings and Condell. That's in the churchyard at St. Mary Aldermansbury in London, and you've got a little copy of the Shakespeare First Folio on the plinth there. So I'm glad they get some credit for putting this together. This is an old broadside. On previous occasions, I've shown a yet older broadside that advertised a play from 1598. This one's from 1603, but you can see William Shakespeare's name and Hemmings and Condell listed under them. So they knew each other. They had known each other for a long period of time. And again, they had been performing these plays, so they knew it was not something abstract. They knew how the plays had been performed. The book is produced, typeset, printed, sold in the area of London around St. Paul's Cathedral, which is to printing and publishing what the West End or Broadway is to theater. So there you have an aerial view of the St. Paul's churchyard, and then I've got a little red arrow pointing up there to a particular street that's going to come back in a minute, and that's Paternoster Row. I don't know if you can read that, but the area around the churchyard had printing presses. It had Caxton's first printing press that was brought to England, publishers, printers, booksellers, and so on, all crowded into this churchyard around St. Paul's. That's important for a couple of reasons. One is that the number of printing presses was limited by the state, by the crown. And part of the reason for that was they wanted to have eyes on what was being produced. Now remember, Shakespeare lives after the creation of the Church of England under Henry Tudor. So he has the split from the Catholic Church, declares himself the head defender of the faith and the head of the Church of England. Thereafter, you have, Henry, his son, Mary, who's a Catholic, and then they switch what Bible you can use, and then Elizabeth becomes queen, and then they switch again what Bible you can use, and so on. The crown was very concerned about what ideas were being propagated. Maybe sometime later we'll talk about Shakespeare and censorship, but all of the printing being in one place was so that the crown and the church could keep an eye on what was being printed and the ideas that were being disseminated. Another sort of overhead view of St. Paul's Church, the area of the roof was 2 acres. So I wrote a little bit about that because I wrote in some detail about how it collapsed during the Great Fire of London. Again, the red arrow there points to Paternoster Row, which you'll see in a minute. There's the more typical aerial or Wenceslas Holler view of St. Paul's, sort of iconic part of the London skyline. These two slides are of a medieval printing press. So you've got the frame that the paper is being put into. You've got one guy on the side with these two sheepskin covered balls, and he inks the balls and then rubs the ink across the typeface, and then the paper gets folded back on top of it. And then you can see sort of on the right there, looks like a baseball, but it's actually a handle that you would use, and actually it looks a little bit like an olive press. The handle would have been pulled by one of the workers and scrunched the plate against the paper, and then you would have your printed image. And again, all of this was done under the watchful eye of the crown and the church. Now, to the story of why Pericles is not in the First Folio, I need to talk a little bit about intellectual property. Basically, what we would call copyright law. Boo. Yeah. Did not exist at the time. And to the extent that there were any property rights in the plays, they belonged to whoever bought them. So the playwright would sell to a theater. If you saw Shakespeare in Love, you saw this happen. Burbage buys plays from Shakespeare and from Marlowe for, I think, 5 sovereigns or something like that. And then the theater company, which would own the only copy of the play, would have the rights to publish it if they wanted to, but to perform it because they were the only ones with the script. Any other company that could get a copy of the script could also perform the play. And of course, the playwright was sworn to give only the one copy to the company. And company did not want to publish the play because they didn't want competition from other play companies performing the same works, especially if they were popular. So there we go, economics comes back into everything. So, however, the search of a good profit for a well-enjoyed play, for a play that people liked going to, motivated people to get corrupt copies of the plays and kind of in sneaky ways. I've talked about them before. So one is to send someone who does stenography out into the audience and then write down as quickly as they can what the actors are saying. Second is to get an actor that has a minor part to come in and then squeal and say, comedy of errors, go, and then write down whatever they could remember. I emphasize that these would have been minor players because most of the major players were shareholders in the theater, and they wouldn't want to give away the secrets of the theater. They wouldn't want to give away their property. So what we end up with is plays that are published surreptitiously, not by the playwright, not by the people who had bought the only copy of the manuscript, but by any publisher who could get the work and register it for publication. So where do you do that? You go to the Royal Company of Stationers. Isn't that a great name? Much better than, FDA or something like that. Royal Company of Stationers. So this is a picture of the Stationers Hall, which still exists. There it is. Still there. Rupert Murdoch is a member of the Royal Company of Stationers, is a newspaper printer. Yeah. And you would have a registry in which you would record the work that you were about to publish. Maybe some detail about it that you might think is important. So for example, maybe the author's name, but not necessarily. Not necessarily. Shakespeare's name appears in the registry a number of times. Once it became obvious that putting his name on the work made it more popular. I'll talk a little more about that when I get to the 4th folio a little later on. But here we have, I have a clear copy coming up here in a minute. Here we have the entry in the registry, May 20th, 1608, for Pericles, Prince of Tyre, and then below that, Antony and Cleopatra. And it's entered, I have a clearer copy in a moment, but it's entered by Edward Blunt, whose name will come up again in a minute. And those of you who've been to my talks before know that he has something to do with the First Folio as well. So first entry for Pericles, Prince of Tyre, and that is, I've typed it out for you because the Elizabethan hand script is a little hard to read, even on the clear copy. The Book of Pericles, Prince of Tyre, and again by Edward Blunt. Now, there's a clearer copy. There's the registry with the date at the top. And the very last line here that the red arrow is pointing to is Pericles, Prince of Tyre, and then Antony and Cleopatra underneath that. And again, registered to Edward Blunt. So here's the title page of that first edition, if you will, published in 1609, so not that much later after it was registered. But I've got two arrows there. So one is the publication date. The registry was 1608. This is 1609. Imprinted in London for Henry Gosson. Wait a minute. What happened to Blunt? The answer is we don't know, but he in some way transferred his rights to Gosson, who then published the work. We don't have the paperwork on that yet, is exactly how that worked. Yep. It happens a lot with the publication of the Fourth Folio as well. I'll talk about that a little later. So first edition, 1609. There's a second edition, also in 1609, which is basically, looks the same, right? Same publisher, same year. The type had to be reset, though. It wouldn't have been the same type set from the first edition because, by law, you could print no more than 1,500 copies from a single typesetting. Then you had to break down the type, return all the type to the cases, and then start all over again. Guild work. Guild work. Okay, so second edition, 1609 means what? Means that the play was selling well. Means that the play was selling well. And so the publisher, Henry Gosson, would have wanted, which sells the book, I don't know if you can read that at the bottom, at the sign of the sun in Paternoster Row. So remember I told you Paternoster Row? There it is. Paternoster Row, that's where the book sellers were. Okay, so the publisher would have wanted to keep whatever rights he had from the registry, keep them. And so when, let me go back, when Hemmings and Condell came to them and said, hey, we want to put this volume together, how about we publish Pericles at the same time in this volume, they would have said, no, we're doing very well selling it on our own. We don't know if yours is going to sell at all, but we certainly don't want competitors out there publishing it. There is another collection of Shakespeare's plays published by William Jaggard, whose name you'll see again, for Thomas Pavier, who had tried to collect 10 plays that were purported to be written by William Shakespeare. And Pericles, I'm sorry, so the was included in the Pavier Quarto, and it is the Pavier Quarto that Henry Folger chose to have in his hands, not one of his 82 copies of the First Folio, but the Pavier Quarto is the one that he's holding when he had his portrait painted for by Frank Salisbury for the unveiling of the Shakespeare Folger Library in Washington, D.C. So that's 1609, 1619. By 1619, Shakespeare is deceased. 1623, the Shakespeare First Folio goes on sale. Publishers are Isaac Jaggard and Edward Blunt. The entry, which I'll show you in a moment, includes 16 plays not formerly entered to other men. So the rest of the plays had already been put in the registry, save Pericles. All right, so you've got the list of the plays that had not formerly been published. Why is that important? Because arguably, from that era, we have about 50% of the plays we know of, we have copies of. And these had never been published before and arguably would have vanished into thin air had they not been published in the first folio. So that is why it might be a little over the top to say it, but I'm not sure, that this is the book that saved half of Shakespeare's oeuvre from the ash heap of history, literally the ash heap. Yeah? Yes, okay. So where's Pericles? And the answer is the publisher did not give permission to print it, and so it did not appear in the first folio. It did not appear in the second folio. It did not appear in the third folio. But by the time we get to the fourth folio, finally, Pericles appears. So the widow of the original publisher likely transferred the rights to the publisher of the fourth folio. Again, we don't have the paperwork on that, but we know it didn't appear in the second or the third, and it was a popular play. So by the fourth, Pericles is included. And here we have the fourth folio published according to the true original copies, unto which is added 7 plays never before printed in folio. Right, so Pericles had been out there in at least 3 editions before. And then listing the plays, you've got the arrow there, Pericles, Prince of Tyre. And then some of the other favorites that you've all read in high school, The London Prodigal, The History of Thomas Lord Cromwell, Sir John Oldcastle, The Puritan Widow, A Yorkshire Tragedy, and The Tragedy of Locrine, none of which were written by Shakespeare. But it's a nice try to turn an extra profit. But at least Pericles was at least partially written by Shakespeare. Okay, so I like the description. Never before. So there is the folio page from Pericles. This is a page from the fourth folio, Pericles, Prince of Tyre. And that's one of Gower's soliloquies that you have there. There is, oops, there you go. So this, I assume, is, it's one of the 2 brides-to-be that Pericles dances with. So either the one whose father tries to get him assassinated, or the one who gives his daughter away, one or the other, right? There is Antiochus hiring an assassin to go get Pericles. So finally, Pericles makes it into print. Now, some new developments in the first folio, because I've been chatting with people beforehand. One is, have there been more copies discovered? Not since the last time I saw you. No. But one did go up for auction. So less than a month ago. So there it is. So this was July 20th, 2022, a copy of the Shakespeare First Folio. Where is Derek here by any chance? No? I want to make sure he's sitting down if he is. Yeah, okay. So this copy had some problems with it, and I've described what problems you can have in these, that they're made up of other copies, or they're missing plays, or what have you. Some of the pages are facsimile or something like that, will lower the auction price of the work. This one sold at $2.47 million. So, yeah, want to be respectful handling that copy that's in the other room there. We're down to about fewer than 20 copies of the first folio that are held in private collections. Now, I say about, not because I like to be imprecise, but because, of course, people may have copies we don't yet know about. So there is a census of copies that's out there, 435 copies known, and who knows who has one in their garage or in their carriage house lurking. But when you have prices of 2.47, people start to look through. I wonder if Grandpa's dusty books have got a first in there. What are you talking about? It's only old poetry. Yes, so that might be in there somewhere. The original price, by the way, was 15 shillings. So 15 shillings to 2.47 million. Inflation. So that concludes my presentation. My revels have ended. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Four. So Folger, Shakespeare Library, 82 out of 235. British Library, 5. Huntington, oh, I'm sorry, Huntington has 2. And then we're down in the single digits. Most collectors, Morgan, J.P. Morgan's probably the most famous one, you would have known him, wanted one of the high spots for collecting. So 1 Gutenberg Bible, 1 Audubon Elephant Folio, 1 Shakespeare First Folio. Oh, and Huntington was famous for collecting on block. So he would buy somebody's whole collection. And so he ends up with first, second, third, fourth. That was also a sort of a popular way of collecting in the 19th century, was buy all 4 together. Yeah. Yes? The 4th folio, oh, I'm going to get it wrong, 1685, is that right? Yeah, much after the Great Fire of London. So the 3rd folio turns out to be the rarest because many of the copies were still in the under the transept of St. Paul's, not sold yet when the fire happened, and so many of the copies burned. And so it's quite rare. But that came out before or around the time of the Great Fire, and then the 4th folios after that. Yes?
Why did Mr. Folger choose that particular volume for the portrait instead of the 1st folio?
All we know is what the artist said after the sittings, and he just said this was the crown jewel of what was in his collection. Now, here's another hypothesis, not to say that the artist was not correct, but the artist might not have known everything that we know, which is that all of Folger's stuff was in warehouses in boxes. So he would collect the things, they would come in by mail, he and Emily would look over them and love them, and then pack them away in a storage box and send it to one of the fireproof warehouses in Manhattan or Brooklyn where they stored their entire collection. And when I was doing research for The Millionaire and the Bard, I looked to see in the inventories, did they send the firsts there too? And the answer is yes. Everything. And so I could tell you from, I have to look it up, 1936 to, from 1926 to 1929, in room 17 of the Manhattan warehouse, in box number 68, that's where Folger Folio 16 is. He had it all in his little handwriting, which box had which things in the inventory. Later, I assume when typewriters became more available, Emily Folger started typing the inventory, but all of that stuff was in storage. So it may just be that Salisbury said, well, bring something with you as a prop. What have we got around here, you know? And yeah, so I like my story better. But any other, yes?
And I said that my enthusiasm when you went into intellectual property is very genuine. I'm one of the library's copyright people. And a lot of times, you know, the job is, before the person even finishes the sentence that begins with can I, the answer's no.
No.
In the assessment, it looks like and your opinion on this is, scholars sort of owe a debt to some of that early copyright legislation in a way. In other parts, you've gone into that in more depth.
Right, so the Act of Queen Anne is the closest we have to something like our copyright law, and that's not till 1709. So too late to help Shakespeare. But, so that sort of formal property right held by the author doesn't happen until then. Yeah. So, yeah, again, the property rights would have gone to the publisher. How did you get to publish? You were the first to get to the Royal Company of Stationers and say, I'm going to publish this. Right. Yes?
The same printer printed all the copies, is that true?
Of the first folio, yes. Yeah.
How was the copyright law enforced at that time? If somebody violated, what would you do about it?
Do you mean in the time that the first folio was being? The owners of the theater would say, go to the person who would have, oh, I see what your question is. They would have gone to the master of the revels or the Royal Company of Stationers and said, they're not allowed to perform this, they're not allowed to publish it. For performances, it would have been the master of the revels, a job title I relish. And the master of the revels would have been able to tell them they could or could not perform a particular work. So no doubt there are scholars who studied that, who got a surreptitious copy of Hamlet and tried to perform it in York or something like that and got stopped by doing it. But that's basically how that would have been done.
What role did chapbooks play in the assembly of the folios?
I'm sorry, who?
What role did chapbooks play?
I don't know.
Chapbooks, were the texts that were written out for each of the actors that had
Okay, so
The role, the role.
Yeah, they were called chapbooks.
Okay,
the actors
okay,
had.
not the sides would have been taken, would have been handprint. So let me distinguish between the two. So if we're talking about the same thing, this would have been the fair copy somebody would have transcribed to give to the theater. Is that what you mean?
To give to each of the actors. So
Oh,
that
okay.
they could learn their role.
Okay, so and you called them sides before, right?
I understand that they're like, we get the modern word roll from them. They were scrolls, they weren't in paper, but maybe there were also ones that were
Right,
yeah.
right. So those would have been available to the major actors playing the major roles, and those playing the minor roles would only have had their little sides, just their words that would have been on it. The theater would have owned them, and they would have kept them under lock and key. So I think that's I'm working on a play about the fire at the Globe, and oh yeah, and so it's very cinematic to think you've got the two most valuable things that the theater owns are the manuscripts and the costumes, both under lock and key, and they would have put these manuscripts in this box, and they would have locked it away, and it went up in flames. So most of the manuscript material that they had went up in flames in 1616. That's the short answer to your question. That's the short answer to the question, is that they wouldn't have had many of those left because they went up in smoke.
But didn't the actors use this? My understanding was that there was a vibrant trade in the I call them chapbooks, you call them rolls, but
I don't know, you may know more than I.
Yeah, and more than I do.
They were valuable and they were sold. It was a perk that an actor would have.
No doubt. Well, I don't know that a perk, because the theater company would not want them to sell it, because then somebody else would compete with them. And again, how do you get the actors on board with that? You make them shareholders. You make them, hey, you get a piece of the profit. You want to sell this copy to someone else, your profits go down, you lose money. But a minor actor might have, in a minor, there are no minor actors. There are only minor roles, right? So an actor in a minor role might have done that. I'm not familiar with the idea of trade in these chapbooks, but I'm going to look into it now. That's interesting. Yeah. Yep. Any other questions? Okay. Then my revels have ended. Thank you.
Hello, Eli Simon. Can you thank you so much for being here. Would you like to introduce what's up next?
All right, great. Happy to. Thank you so much, and thank you, Andrea. What an incredible presentation, right? I guess I can take my mask off. I think tomorrow we're unmasked inside, optionally. But not today. So, and in the theater, you can wear your mask or not. It's interesting. About 50-50, right? Okay, so we wanted to share with you a little bit of our work from this summer. so our summer shows. How many of you have seen one of our plays, let's say? Oh, okay. Well, so I'll talk a little bit more about the remaining shows, but for those of you that have seen Pericles, we have Annalise Hermsen here with us tonight and today, and I always just think it's night, but it's, you know, I don't think I've given a speech like this during the day for as long as I can remember. It's like the sun is out. What's going on? Annalise, all of our actors are in both plays, The Comedy of Errors and Pericles, Prince of Tyre, aside from Randy Thompson, who's playing Pericles. He's only in Pericles. Well, it'd be weird if he was playing Pericles and was in Comedy of Errors, but I guess it might work. But Annalise is in both shows, and in Pericles, she plays the role of Marina. Now, we were going to present this scene between Marina and Bolt, the guy that kind of runs the brothel, but that actor's just not available today, which is fine because we can kind of focus on Marina a little bit more, and she's going to present a monologue from the play and from this scene that she's in. And, you know, I want to say just a few words, if I may, about Annalise. So, Annalise, you're going to be a senior, yes?
Yes.
All right, so we've got, so people think that all of the actors in our company are graduate actors, and most of them are, or they are alums from our graduate acting program, like Abel Garcia here, who's been in several seasons and is featured this summer as well. We also have undergraduates. We actually have 3 undergraduates in our company this year. So we have, in terms of who's acting, undergrads, we have graduate actors, and we have alums who are generally professional actors, all mixed together by design, because we want our students working side by side with pros. That's how they learn, just as they did in Shakespeare's time. You had apprentices, you had novice actors working with some of the skilled actors that were in the company, friends of Shakespeare's and Shakespeare himself, who played small roles, we think. So anyway, Annalise was we first kind of she came to our attention in a production of Hamlet that we saw. Beth and I were sitting together, and we kind of went, wow, she's really good. You know, let's make sure we audition her this summer. Beth particularly had her in mind kind of almost immediately for Marina. And Beth's a master of casting. She's our casting director at New Swan. And that's how this came about. We actually asked her to audition, thinking we probably were going to cast her, and we did. And we're really, really happy we did. We have a company unlike any company we've ever had. This is a spectacularly talented company all the way through. I won't even say top to bottom, because there is no top, there's no bottom. It's just kind of side to side all the way. Right now we have a few actors out, and other actors have just kind of come in, and each night somebody's playing different roles than they ever played before in addition to their roles. It's kind of mind-boggling. So that's kind of what's going on with our company right now. Soon we'll be back at full force. And I'm going to just let Annalise do this great monologue from Pericles. And she's playing the role of Marina, who's more or less the ingenue, as would make sense, and is featured really in the second half of the play. She's kind of, things are set up to meet her and watch her journey that happens in the second part of the play. So anyway, here is Annalise Hermsen.
All right, thank you, Eli, for that great intro. And before I dive into this, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this play by now, but if you haven't seen it or you're not sure what's going down, Marina has been dropped off at a brothel. She's been kidnapped by pirates, and she's very chaste and doesn't want to lose her virginity, doesn't want to give up any power. So she's actually spoken holy words to a bunch of the brothel goers, and they've run away in like a panic to go find God. So as a last resort, the owners of the brothel have sent their like sort of manservant to take her virginity, to finally like break her spirit. So this is like her final resort to make him change his mind. Prithee, tell me one thing first. What canst thou wish thine enemy to be? No, not thy master nor thy mistress. Neither of these are so bad as thou art, since they do better thee in their command. Thou holdest a place for which the painedest fiend of hell would not in reputation change. Thou art the damned doorkeeper to every coistrel that comes inquiring for his tib. To the choleric fisting of every rogue thy ear is liable. Thy food is such as hath been belched on by infected lungs. Do anything but this thou doest. Empty old receptacles are common shores of filth. Serve by indenture to the common hangman. Any of these ways are yet better than this. That the gods would set me free from this place. Here's gold for thee. If that thy master would gain by thee, proclaim that I can sing, weave, sew, and dance with other virtues which I'll keep from boast. And I will undertake all these to teach. I doubt not but this populous city will yield many scholars.
All right, now you know why we cast her, right? So if you haven't seen Pericles yet, there are a few seats remaining. There are not a lot of seats remaining, but there are a few. And if you haven't seen the Comedy of Errors, we added 3 shows because the run is sold out. There's no seats remaining for the plays in our regular season. So we actually have a show next Tuesday night, Wednesday night, that's the 23rd, the 24th, and then the following Tuesday, the 30th, and there are seats. There are going to be seats available for those shows. So if you couldn't get a ticket, now you can get a ticket. So we invite you to come and join us. And
there's still seats for Pericles.
There are some seats for Pericles, yes. And every seat in the theater is a good seat. So you may think, oh, I don't want to sit like in the heavens, the balcony up there on the left side. It's a great seat. It's just real different than the seat that's down low on the right side. You could actually see these plays a number of times from different places and get a completely different view of it. But Pericles is a beautiful production. I don't think you're going to see a better production of Pericles. It's just brilliantly directed by Beth Lopes. She's been working on it for years and years and years. And it works. So, and I think a lot of other productions probably don't, because it's the play is somewhat fractured.
Can I say something about Shakespeare
Please.
Weekend?
Please. Oh yes, please.
Tangled up in blue here. First, I want to thank the libraries and Annalise and Eli and everybody, our patrons, our friends, our actors. This has been, you don't want to know the planning and problem solving that Eli has been doing every step of the way. This man inspires me every day. The First Folio Friday launches our Shakespeare Weekend, as it has for about 10 years now. And Shakespeare Weekend involves study with me tomorrow, beginning at 1:30 is coffee, 2 o'clock is study, and then an opportunity to again learn from Eli and some of his actors about the actual production. So we do still, this is a free study like this event today, made possible by our supporters to keep as much as we can free. And we would love to have people come if you want to study Pericles or comedy with an English professor, and then with our actors and directors. Beth will be there for Pericles, which is exciting. It's really great. And if you don't have a ticket yet to Pericles, you got a little taste of it. This is actually one of my favorite plays by Shakespeare. And I think that Eli had great courage in allowing it to be performed, because it's a new thing. And our patrons have really grown with us. Many of them have been coming for 10 years, and they're ready for a challenge and a mystery and a revelation and an epiphany, and that's what they have. So anyway, thank you all, and I hope I'll see you tomorrow or Sunday for Shakespeare Weekend.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you, Annalise, for that wonderful performance. Again, thank you so much, Andrea, for your wonderful and enlightening talk in the incorporation of intellectual property, which just made my afternoon. Thank you. Andrea will be signing copies of her book in room 28 while supplies last. We hope that you enjoyed us and will enjoy this and will enjoy future Libraries events. These events are a great opportunity for us to showcase our wonderful treasures like the First Folio. It is through philanthropic support that we can preserve these materials and make them available with our community of users. If you're interested in learning more about the UCI Libraries and our Gateway Society, I encourage you to take a brochure with you. And my note says show brochure, but I don't have one up. So, and now you're invited to view the First Folio and other rare materials in room 28 and to enjoy a light lunch on the patio. Guests may choose to view the folio first or eat lunch first, but they have to be separate activities after that. Sloppy Joe, view the portfolio, disaster. And so again, if you choose to have lunch first, we're asking I know it's the last day, but please put your face mask on when you come back into the building. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.